to work on larger strategic projects within NBD. Before that, I was at the Rochester Police Department for 4 years. That was sort of where I started doing data analysis and GIS. I also worked at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department before that while I was working on my master's degree in Charlotte. I have a bachelor's from Geneseo. And I said I love traveling, running, making sourdough bread, especially throughout quarantine, being with my husband and my kids. And mostly I love GIS. I love maps. My whole family, we're all sort of map nerds. So showing this information and doing this type of work is exciting for me. So within NBD, our vision for GIS is we have sort of 3 main goals: to make geographic data easier for use for internal staff. So for a long time, the use of this data was limited to GIS analysts. And anytime anybody wanted to be able to use this data, they had to come to a GIS analyst to ask for a map, to ask to look at the data, to view the data on a map, etc. With the development of these web applications, we've empowered the staff to be able to do a lot of this analysis themselves. We also enable the public to be able to do some of this work and to answer some of their own questions. So instead of having to call City Hall or make a visit to City Hall, they're able to answer basic questions themselves, such as who's my code inspector? What's my zoning district? Where are the demolitions occurring in my neighborhood? Where are the vacant lots in my neighborhood? This not only saves them time, but this saves the city's staff time as well, and it allows city staff to focus on more important tasks. We also have given them the ability not only to view the data online, but to extract that data as well. So along with those things comes increased accountability and transparency. I know that's the vision of a lot of municipalities, a lot of organizations. Putting this data out there in a web format has really allowed us to build public trust. This data is mostly live data, so whatever the city staff is seeing is the same as what the citizens are seeing as well. It's a different way to communicate with the citizens. There's been a lot of training that's gone on with it. And not only are the processes updated daily and live, but that also cuts down on paper. So a little history of WebGIS within NBD. It was really around 2015 that we started using these web applications. Before that, we were mostly pushing things onto our website using paper maps, like attached PDFs. Sometimes we would zip some data and put it up there. I always wanted to be zipping shapefiles and putting them up there. Oops, hang on, I'm getting a chat notify. Okay, can I slow down a bit? Yes, I'll try. So around 2015 was when I started to notice that we were getting consistent requests for the same type of maps. And the specific map that came to mind when we started thinking about this was our vacant structures, vacant lots, and city-owned properties. So we were getting constant requests from neighborhood groups, from internal city staff, from consultants for this data, and we would create it for them in a PDF form, and we would send it to them. But I always said, as soon as we hit print, this data is outdated because it's changing daily. So we worked with our IT department, we worked with Mike Ross, we worked with the mainframe team to start automating this data. It was using a SAS report, which we're still using today for a lot of this data, to pull the data out of our mainframe, turn it into GIS data, and get it into web services that we can use to build these applications. We now have 18 plus neighborhood and business development specific public facing interactive maps, along with additional internal applications for staff. So here's a screenshot on the right-hand side of our vacant properties. I'll go through some of these later once I switch to the other screen sharing. And then a small screenshot of what our map gallery looks like today. So the basic principles we use when we're building these applications are that they're easy to use. A lot of the public isn't comfortable using these initially. We want to make sure that they can easily use these, that they make sense, that they're mobile friendly, they work on all types of devices, that they answer a specific question. So we really try to keep most of these web apps really simple. I mentioned these two before, or a couple of these. What's my zoning? Type in your address and you get a result for what's your zoning district. Who's my code inspector? Where is the lead high risk area? These are answering very specific questions. Repeated demand. This is what I mentioned about the vacant map. We were getting requests for this data multiple times a week. We were being asked to, you would do it one day and then 3 days later, somebody wanted it with a new date on the top, which required you to pull the data again, map the data again, create the PDF again. We really wanted to focus on products that we were getting questions a lot and create a process that took the workload off of us to have to do that on a daily basis. And we also want to allow users to pull out the data for further analysis. So some examples of our public versus our internal applications, and this is just a couple, I'll go through some more in a few minutes. For our public applications, what's my zoning, vacant lots and structures, our demolition tracker, and building blocks, which is a much more comprehensive and robust system that I'm also going to demo at the end of this. Some of our internal applications are our low mod census tract lookup. So our housing department uses that. It's a simple web application that allows them to type in an address and it returns a yes or no answer of whether or not that is in a census tract that's classified to be low mod. Our mailing label system, this allows internal staff to type in an address and create mailing labels, either in a label format or in a spreadsheet within a certain radius of an address or within a certain boundary drawn or within certain streets. So we use this for all of our mailings for our boards meetings. They use this for special events such as parade routes. Anytime we need to contact the public, this is an easy way for internal staff to use GIS to pull the most current property ownership information. Our development review application, this is a new application that we're still finishing completing. This takes data from Department of Environmental Services, DES, and NBD, and combines it into one application for everyone in City Hall that's involved in the development review process. So this could be street project staff, this could be the site plan review process, any type of process that a property or a neighborhood is going through. We've tried to create a one-stop place for people to come and see. I think right now we have like 30 layers in there. They can turn things on and off to look at where are we building bike lanes, where are we doing street projects, where are the boards and commissions other cases occurring, a one-stop shop for internal staff to review. And our boards and commissions data, not only do we have this public facing, but internally we've created a dashboard using operations dashboard for ArcGIS that allows city staff to look at how many cases have gone to certain boards over a certain time frame. This is all, they can adjust this on the fly. How many have been approved? How many of certain types of cases have come to these boards? So a central place for staff to come and be able to do some analysis on this data. Within our web applications, we try to always put some consistent elements. We try to make things look the same across the city of Rochester. And some of the main things that we focus on in the applications are an address locator bar. So usually up in the top left-hand side, we have a place where somebody can type in an address and it pulls them right to that location. An export table to Excel. So within our attribute table, which is another function we generally always have in here, we give people the ability to export this data to Excel. Within that attribute table as well, there's a filter by map extent button This allows people, that table will automatically be updating as you zoom in or out based on what's visible on the screen. We generally try to have an information widget. This gives an overview of the data. It gives an overview of the department who's hosting that data, and it has contact information, not just about the data, but about like the broader Department of Real Estate or zoning or whoever the department contacts are. And then we also always have our legend and layers widgets up at the top as well. So one thing we've worked really hard on is the updating process for these maps. We want to make sure that when we're putting these out to the public, this is good data, it's consistent data. The public and the internal staff doesn't have to worry about, has this been updated? When was the last update? So all of our applications have a designated editor. Sometimes this is a web application that they're using an Esri edit application to update the data. So they'll log in through Portal with their city credentials. We have certain groups assigned to certain maps. Only those people have edit permissions on those maps. Other maps, they're updating in the mainframe. So that data is pulling nightly from the mainframe, but there's an assigned staff member that it has to make sure that that data is being updated. That's more of our vacant structures. Those are code inspectors updating that. The business permits are being updated by our neighborhood service center staff. So all maps have a process to be updated, which guarantees that this data is updated and reliable. So I'm going to switch now over to my web browser. Let me figure out how to do this. And I'm going to go through a demo of some of these. Also, let me try to, okay. So I mentioned at the beginning, we now have a much larger map gallery than we initially had. When it was our first web application, the vacant structures, we just embedded that into a web page for the vacant program. Since then, we've created our own NBD map gallery. We also have one of these that Mike Ross manages for the entire citywide maps. Some of these are on both, but everything on here is specific to neighborhood and business development. So within the city's website program, it's called Ectron, we've embedded an Esri gallery application. You can see, scroll down, this is the embedded content. Each one has a description of the map that allows users to quickly and easily see what that is, and then they can click on it and it opens right from there. So some of the ones that have been really popular that we've pushed out, I think this is my favorite one. This is our land use boards and commissions page. So this has our city planning commission, our preservation board, our zoning board of appeals, and within the past 2 weeks, I think 3 weeks, we've now added our site plan review projects as well. This is an Esri story map, tabbed content. It allows you to quickly scroll between all 4 of these boards. It allows you to see current cases, previous cases, canceled cases. It allows you to see how to submit feedback, tells you about how to use the map. It has an email link to the staff member that you can contact about it. They also, for the other boards, they have a link directly to that web page. So I'm going to click on this. I didn't have this open, so I hope it opens okay. So before we had this map, the page looked like this, and then it had all of these agendas and these grids right here. This was how people viewed the data. We had the idea that it would be easier for people to view this in a spatial format because this data is inherently spatial. So if a citizen was driving down the street and they see a sign in a window that said this property is going to, you know, some board, but they can't remember what that board is when they get home later in the day, or they can't remember exactly what street they were on, they could come to this website. It's also mobile friendly. These story maps work really nice in a mobile format. They allow you to swipe right through the different tabs. They could, you know, come here and say, I think I was near Driving Park Ave and I saw this sign in the window. They could zoom right in, see this blue star that says it's a current case. click on the pop-up and get all of the information about this case. So it's got the purpose, it has the address, it has the date of the public hearing. And then if there's attachments, which there's not for this case, let me try to find one. It has the attachments right here. So it has this, for this one, this is an older case, it has the decision for that case, and it also has the staff report. So a much easier way, we still keep the data in this website as well, in case people prefer to look at it in a paper format, or in case they want to pull it out or print it out for the meeting. But also within these websites, we've also embedded the same map application, so people can see it here, or they can see it here with all 4 of the boards. The other one I mentioned a few times is the What's My Zoning app. So this one I think is also really simple, but really impressive. You can either type in an address or you can just click anywhere on the map. So I'm going to click in the south wedge. It zooms you in, and then over on the right-hand side, not only does it tell you the zoning district, but we've linked directly to the E-code online. Hopefully this will work. So that link for the R2 district brought me right here to the City of Rochester code for an R2 district. So it's a really simple way for people to not only identify what zoning district they're in, but to be able to link directly to that code, not have to come to this website and try to dig around and figure out how to get there. Really straightforward, really simple question. Vacant structures, vacant land, and city-owned properties. Again, I mentioned this was one of the first ones we did. Really basic functionality. We have 4 layers on top of our neighborhood service center quadrants. People can zoom in. They can either click on any property to get data about that case, or they can open up the table. It's filtering by the map extent, so it's only showing, right now we have 78 vacant demolition properties. You can flip through the tabs for each layer. 166 city-owned properties. We have a tab for vacant land, vacant structures, and again, the option to export this to Excel. So somebody can zoom into their neighborhood and they can export this data to Excel for any of the layers that they're interested in. The city-owned real estate map is a good example of a map that was a really great process improvement within the city. This was data that was already automated to be running monthly. It was being run by IT and printed into a really thick book that was being printed and bound and put onto desk of like 100 people every single month. So when we found out that this data was already halfway automated, we suggested that instead of running it monthly and binding the data, we just create it into a web map. So now the process runs nightly, same data. We've used the same classifications that were in the book, but instead of somebody having to call City Hall and say, I'm interested in a property, what's the status of that property? They can now come directly to this web application. Again, they can zoom in. So let me zoom into Beechwood. I'm going to click filter by map extent. And then this is going to start updating. I can see city-owned properties. And then we have the description, whether it's a hold property, that could be it's being held for a project, whether it's available. There's actually very few available properties, but there are some that the city is selling, looking to sell. And then it links you right to our property information system. So if you're interested in a property, you can come right here. It'll zoom you in, and then you can click through the different tabs to get additional information on that property. Internally, I mentioned a couple of applications. The 2 I mentioned, this is our development review application. I don't have anything turned on right now, but we've got our local waterfront revitalization program boundaries. Everything within here has to undergo additional review. We have our bike trails, our flood zones, our boards and commissions cases, our vacant structures, our zoning districts, all of our demolition data, DES data. We have traffic volumes in here, street projects in here. So again, just another tool for city staff to be able to look at an assortment of data from different departments all in one location. We're still working on finalizing this. We have a working group of different staff who use this data to talk about what's most useful for them. But before this app existed, they were calling around to different people who manage that data. So what we're hoping to do is eliminate the need for them to have to call everyone or email people, and they can just go onto a web application and see all of the data they need. I mentioned our low mod census tract lookup. Again, this is really basic, but needed for grant funding for the city. It allows any staff member to come in, type in an address, and it tells you yes or no whether or not you're in a low mod census district. The last app that I want to talk about is a bit different. It's called Building Blocks. I mentioned it in my presentation. This was actually what I was initially asked to present on, but I wanted to show sort of our broader approach within NBD and how we got to this point. So I've mentioned multiple times that most of our apps are answering one simple question. That makes it really easy for the public and even for staff to get answers to their questions. What Building Blocks does is takes a lot of our city services and combines them using either a spatial join or an attribute join into one central application. So this is different. This isn't hosted by Esri. We're using a consultant company called Ptolemy that manages this for us, but we have our landing page within the city's website. We have a chart of all of the data in here for the public. We also have a training guide on here. When you click into the system, it looks like this. So it starts with all of our properties. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but up in the top right, it shows that we're starting with all city properties. So we have 65,000 properties. And then over on the left-hand side, we can filter by really any of our, at least NBD specific data. We have pulled in some additional data from other departments within the city. There's also some non-city data in here. So I was going to show you a couple of examples of how we use this. One thing I was thinking was a neighborhood group. Hang on, let me just cancel that out. A neighborhood group might be interested in looking at vacant structures that have had more than one burglary in the past year. So here's our results. I'm now down to 72 properties. And then I'm going to add a filter. I'm going to go down to my overlays and I'm going to pick my neighborhood. So let's say my neighborhood is 14621. I now can see my result set of 18 properties. So again, that was a quick way for the public to say, within my neighborhood, I want to look at vacant structures with a burglary in the past year in the 14621 neighborhood. Another example for internal city staff, I want to look at one way that we have inspectors try to identify vacant properties is looking at properties that we've noticed are going through a foreclosure process, but we're still showing as occupied. A lot of times, those properties are actually vacant. So I'm going to choose occupied properties. And then I'm going to go into foreclosures. We're pulling in Liz Pendon's data from the county. And I'm going to say in the past 12 months, properties that have had at least one Liz Pendon. So we now have a result of 61 properties. These are properties that we might think are vacant. We probably should go out into the field to have our inspectors verify this. Once we get our results, we can switch into list format, and then we can add columns for any of the data that's in the system. So I'm going to pretend I'm a supervisor. I've got these 61 cases that I want my inspectors to go check. I can very quickly add the inspector area. And then I can export this to Excel, send this list to my staff and say, if your name is on this list, you need to go to this property and you need to check. We have it as occupied. We think it might be vacant. So a really quick way we used to have to do this manually. People would ask me to compare the Liz Pendons to our vacants list. Using building blocks, we've now been able to put a lot of this basic analysis work into the hands of city staff or into the hands of the public. And then one other website I want to mention is our open data portal. So this we've rolled out. It actually, I think, got rolled out the first week of the pandemic. So sort of unfortunate timing that it was a bit overshadowed by everything else that was going on at that time. But this is taking anything that's already publicly available in any of our applications and putting it, the backend data on here. So it's a really great resource for students, for consultants, for educators, anyone that wants to work with our data. Instead of having to email us to ask for the data, they can now come directly to the open data portal. Let's say I'm interested in properties and housing, and I want feature layers. They can now come directly here. We've got our parcel data, our demolition data, our open case data, our foreclosure data. Anything that's already public facing in a web application, they can now come here and directly get that GIS data. It also has some quick links to our applications. It has links to other open data portals throughout New York State, throughout the country. It links to the census website. But just a different way to present the data and a really easy way for students and researchers to grab our city data without having to contact a city staff person and be sent, around to the right department. I think that's about all I had. I think that was a lot. I got asked to slow down once. But I do want to open it up to questions. I'm going to stop my share and then we'll go from there. If I need to switch back, I can, but
yeah, so if you have questions, just use the chat. Nobody's posted any so far, so.
I talked fast. I'm sorry, Justin.
It's okay.
It was a lot to cover.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention, we are going to put the recording up on YouTube for people who weren't able to attend. So, that's done. So we've got one question from Mike Ross. Does the city have an open data site?
I did. I just demoed that at the end.
Yeah.
So again, the website for that was data.cityofrochester.gov.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to the screen share just because I have my contact info on this last page.
Okay.
No other questions? I'm happy to, if people want to get a hold of me, I'm happy to talk more about how we create these. I love making these web applications. So, and I also love thinking about processes and how municipalities can improve their processes. So I'm happy to talk with people, with their specific questions and how did we do this? And Okay, so now I'm looking.
Okay, so I got a couple questions coming in. Is the gallery of all the maps done on ArcGIS Online?
So we recently switched that over to Portal, but initially we used ArcGIS Online. I think it's called the Gallery application. I think it's available in both ArcGIS Line and for us in Portal. So
Okay.
yes, yes, we took that application, I think it's called the Gallery application, and embedded that within our website.
Okay. The next one is if any field worker or mobility plans in the future?
So we do have a couple applications. I think I sort of ran out of time for field workers. We did do an application once for our billboard data. We had to verify to City Council all of our billboards. So we got the data from Lamar, who's the main billboard company, and we used Collector to send our zoning staff out into the field to verify the information that Lamar sent us. We also have another public-facing app called our Commercial Corridor Data. That is also using Collector to send street liaisons out into the field and mark down any business information, business names, business contacts, and vacancy and occupied status for those businesses.
Okay. Next one is, were all the web apps designed by one department or was it a multidisciplinary team?
So most of the ones I demoed today are specific to neighborhood and business development, but that doesn't mean that it's just me creating these. For every single one of these web applications, there's a pretty robust process it goes through. So generally it starts with me meeting with the staff who manages that data currently. So maybe that's our zoning staff or our code inspectors. Meeting with them and saying, you know, what do you think of this idea? Do you think this would be a better way to present your data? And starting to talk about the fields that they collect, the fields that we want to push to the public. Once we get a basic understanding, I take that data to IT. So that's Mike Ross's team, it's our mainframe team, and we start to develop that data into GIS data. So there's a lot of communication back and forth with between myself and the GIS staff to get that data into GIS. And then once we get it there, it's usually back to then me and the zoning staff or whoever building and formatting the web application. So, you know, it sort of goes back and forth, and some of these take a day and some of these take 6 months. So it really depends on the application, what the process is for these.
Okay, next question. Well, first comment, that was excellent. And then question is, what formats are available and do you partner with the county on a similar product and database?
We have not done a lot of partnering with the county. We've tried to start to work on grabbing some of their data from the back end. So I talked about the Liz Pendens data. That data we're manually pulling every few months. We have talked to them about trying to get back end access to the county clerk system. And if that happened, you know, there's a lot of additional data within the county clerk system that I think we could pull and create really cool city-based applications off of. But otherwise, no, we haven't done a lot of partnering with other agencies. I don't know if Mike Ross would have any comment on that, if he's still here, or anything additional. Mike.
Yeah, he's on. Actually, next question kind of also probably for both of you. Does your organization offer internships?
Well, sometimes we do. Sometimes we do unpaid internships. I believe the mayor's office usually has like an internship group that she hires and they put them out to different departments. I believe all of that is under the mayor's office website. And then I think they sort of try to find a good fit. I think they're called fellowships. I know things have changed in recent years in terms of funding and budgets, But I'm also always happy to have people shadow me if they would like to even just come up for an afternoon to learn more about this. That's always an option as well.
Okay. Oh, okay, and last question. Did your department have any involvement in developing and deploying COVID-related information systems for either tracking active cases or providing economic recovery information to businesses?
Actually, I might let Mike, do you want to answer this one too? I think Mike had a little bit more input with this process.
Sure, yeah. So as far as case tracking and that type of stuff, most of that is done actually almost all of that is done by the county health department. And I know they worked with Monroe County with Scott McCarty's team and developed a pretty nice dashboard for active cases. So that's not, those kind of health department functions aren't something that the city does. We don't have a city health department. That's all done at the county level. We did do a couple of applications. One was a meal finder application. We had, right, I think at the peak of it, 20 or 30 sites between the school district and the rec centers that were offering grab and go meals to kind of fill the gap for kids who got a lot of their food from school breakfasts and lunches. We have a lot of kids in the city get quite a few of their meals that way. And with the schools shut down and the rec centers shut down, they were not getting fed. So that application was based on the nearby template in ArcGIS Enterprise and allowed them to enter an address or their location and showed them the closest locations where they could get a grab and go meal and the operational hours and that kind of information. We're currently working on part of a initiative to restart Rochester, which is a lot of business information. So that is an application with all of the businesses that have reopened and what their hours are and how to get there, that kind of stuff. So we've done a couple of things, but again, most of the health related stuff is done by other parts of the government.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, and thank you, Pam, for presenting. So I guess we'll end the session for this program. We are working on a winter program, which will most likely, again, be online. And still trying to, and then hopefully we'll get some more information to you on if we're able to do a April conference or looking at other alternatives as well, that time period. So one other person I want to thank is one of our advisory board members was the one doing the closed captioning, Brett Carlock. So just thank you to him as well. And I said a couple minutes ago that it was recorded and it will be posted on the GIS SIG website later this week. So, thank you.
Thanks, Justin.